The wind clawed at the dry hills of West Texas like an old dog with cracked teeth. Dust curled in the creases of fences and wagons, and the sun hung above the world like a curse no one could outrun. Eli Harper rode slow beneath it, hat low, shirt plastered to his back with sweat and grime. His boots were near ruined, soles flapping at the toes, and the mare beneath him limped with a stone in her gait. He hadn't eaten since the morning before, not real food anyway, just creek water and a chew of tobacco that made his gut turn worse. He was 29, but the desert had carved his face older. Gray touched his stubble, not from age, but from nights without fire or sleep, from winters buried in snow and summers hunted by debt. He'd run fence for 3 years, lost a brother to a land deal gone wrong, and took a bullet through the thigh in a bar fight he didn't start. Nothing ever turned in his favor, not once. So when he reached Graybend, a sun-faded strip of buildings along the rail spur with a jailhouse, 2 saloons, a church, and the dust-choked memory of hope, he expected nothing better. He wanted water. He wanted a drink strong enough to forget how empty his hands had become, maybe a game of cards. Maybe he'd sleep in the stable loft if they didn't run him off. Instead, he met her. She was leaning against a post outside the general store, arms crossed, chin lifted like she didn't care who stared. A man had to look twice to be sure she wasn't a boy, narrow as a broomstick, long in the legs, face sharp as a flint, but her eyes stopped him. Green like moss and fire both, a face still raw with youth but holding something older in its bones. She wore a plain dress, hemmed dirty, one side torn at the seam. A bruise bloomed on her wrist like a pressed violet. Her boots were too big. Eli stepped down from the saddle, letting the mare drink from the horse trough. His eyes lingered on the girl. Something about her didn't sit right. "You lost?" he asked. She didn't flinch. "You're bleeding." He looked down. His arm had split open at the elbow from a low-hanging mesquite branch earlier that morning. Flies had found it. He grimaced. "You from around here?" he asked. She shook her head. "Ain't from nowhere anymore." A moment passed. Then she turned and walked into the store, like the conversation never happened. Eli stood a long while, staring after her, unsure if he'd seen her at all. Dust had a way of conjuring ghosts. But when she stepped back out carrying a brown sack and a length of rope, he knew she was real. "Your pa around?" he asked, watching her tie the rope tight around the sack. She paused, eyes cutting sharp. "Dead." Eli nodded, unsure what he was looking for. She was too young to be alone, not more than 17, if that. He felt shame crawl up his throat, not for what he'd thought, but for what the world had likely already done to her. "I got work in Abilene," he lied, needing something to say. "If you're headed east, I'll ride beside you." She looked at his mare, ribs showing, then back at him. "You got food?" "No." "You got a gun?" He tapped the .44 on his hip. "Half a cylinder left." She stared at him for another long beat, then hoisted the sack over her shoulder. "I'll walk." She moved down the street like a girl on a mission, boots thudding in rhythm. Eli stood there another moment, jaw tight, and followed her without knowing why. The town watched them pass. An old drunk outside the saloon raised his glass, and the sheriff stepped halfway out the jailhouse door, squinting. At the edge of Graybend, she turned and stopped. "You following me?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. He didn't know what he was doing. "I just don't think a girl should be out here alone." She laughed once, dry. World already decided otherwise. "What's your name?" She didn't answer, just stared him down. Wind stirred the hem of her dress. Finally she said, "Loretta, and I'm not a girl." She turned again, walking into the horizon. Eli hesitated, then followed. By sundown, they were miles from town, walking parallel to the railroad tracks. When they stopped to rest, Loretta lit a match with her teeth and started a fire with dry grass. She handed Eli a strip of jerky from her sack without a word. He chewed it slow, watching the sky bleed orange into black. She sat cross-legged, eyes fixed on the flames. "You got family?" he asked. "No." "Where you headed?" "Nowhere." Silence. She looked at him sideways. "Why'd you come after me?" He didn't have an answer. Maybe it was her eyes. Maybe it was that bruise. Maybe he was just too goddamn tired to be alone anymore. "Seemed like you needed someone." She nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. Then she leaned back and said, "I ain't no one's burden." "I didn't say you were." The fire popped between them. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote howled. Eli listened to it, eyes narrowed, while Loretta stared at the stars like they owed her something. "You ever been married?" she asked. The question hit strange. "No, you." She didn't answer right away. "Maybe I will be," she said. "Tomorrow." Eli looked at her. She wasn't smiling. "Who to?" She turned to face him, and her voice came low. "You." He laughed once, bitter. "Girl, I ain't got land, I ain't got money, I ain't even got both my boots." "You've got a gun," she said. "And I got a reason." He stared at her across the fire, and the flames made her eyes look older than the stars above. "Marry me in the morning," she said. "Then I'll tell you why." They woke in silence, stretched in the ashes of the fire and the chill of dawn. Eli watched her rise and braid her hair back with rough fingers. There was no softness in her movements, every gesture tight, exact. She worked like someone who'd learned efficiency through punishment. She didn't repeat her words from the night before. But he hadn't forgotten. They reached a rail stop by noon. Just a water tower, a telegraph post, and a tin shack where a half-blind preacher slept on a cot beside a jug of whiskey. Loretta walked straight up to him, kicked the side of his boot until he groaned, and said, "You marry people." The preacher blinked at her like she'd spoken in code. Eli stood behind her, hat in his hands, sun hot on the back of his neck. He hadn't said yes, not aloud, but he hadn't said no either. Maybe he was too worn down to fight the current, or maybe some buried part of him wanted to see what happened when a storm like Loretta came through. "Got $5 and a name?" the preacher asked. "I got two," Loretta said, "and a man who'll sign his soul." Eli stepped forward, voice dry. "Name, Harper. Hers is Loretta. That's all you need." The preacher squinted. "You got witnesses?" Eli glanced at the telegraph man inside, who didn't look up from his desk. "He'll do." It wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction done in the heat, with sweat rolling down the preacher's temples and a horsefly buzzing between their heads. Loretta didn't smile. She didn't look at Eli when she said the words. Her voice didn't shake, not once. And when the preacher said, "You may kiss the bride," she turned away, walked to the pump, and splashed water on her face like it was over and done. Eli stood there with a paper in his hand and dust in his mouth. They walked on. By evening, they came upon a ranch with blackened fencing and cattle skulls laid out in a half-buried heap. The farmhouse had been burned to frame and bone. Eli stared long at the wreckage. Loretta just kept walking, mouth tight. He caught up to her. "You knew this place?" "No. You seemed certain." She didn't answer. The land stretched wide and mean. Nothing green, just scrub and bone and sky. They made camp under a lone juniper tree. The branches reached like fingers out of a grave. Eli watched her build another fire with hands that didn't tremble. She tied her rope into loops, 3 nooses, knotted perfect. He didn't ask why, not yet. When the stars came out, she finally spoke. "I was 15 when the McKinnon boys came." Eli didn't move. They owned the land east of Redgate, 5 brothers, big men, proud men. "They didn't like that my pa wouldn't sell the creek that cut through our pasture." So one night they rode in, set the barn alight, and when Pa came out, she stopped, her jaw clenched so tight it looked carved from stone. Ma died in the fire, Pa. I think they made it last. I didn't watch, I ran. Eli said nothing. The fire cracked between them. I lived with a tanner's widow for a spell, cut leather until my hands bled. She died coughing, and I took what she left. Been walking since. She looked at him across the fire, voice flat as dry stone. I need a man to be my husband because I can't go into Redgate alone. They won't look twice at a girl, but a woman with a man. They'll think I belong. Eli's eyes narrowed. You want to kill them. She didn't blink. I want them to die slow. I want them to know who sent the bullet before it hits their teeth. You think marriage gets you close enough. I think wearing your name gets me through the door. The rest is mine to handle. Eli leaned back, looked up at the sky. Stars stared down like witnesses. I never killed a man for sport, he said. She nodded once. Neither have I. He turned his head to her. But I won't stop you. Her expression didn't change. She reached into the sack, drew out a second revolver, nickel-plated, small in the grip, worn clean from use. She slid it across the dirt to him. You'll need both hands. In the morning they rode a stolen wagon toward Redgate. A mule pulled it, stubborn and dull-eyed. Loretta sat beside Eli, bonnet drawn low, pistol hidden beneath her dress hem. They passed a mailman on the road, and he tipped his hat without suspicion. Redgate rose slow, dust-swallowed and hot. The town looked like any other, shutters hanging loose, smoke curling from chimneys, a church spire like a nail against the sky. But Loretta sat up straighter. Her breath changed. The McKinnons own the livery, the grain depot, and the farrier shop. Eldest one, Boyd, he runs poker games out back of the dry goods store. Eli stared at her. You remember all that? She nodded. I remember everything. They rolled into town like pilgrims with nothing to lose. Loretta stepped off the wagon with a basket in her arms. Inside was rope, iron nails, a flask of kerosene. She made the list in her head days ago. They walked hand in hand down Main Street. Not lovers, not newlyweds. Just a man with nothing left, and a girl who'd built her bones from the ash of her family's fire. Behind the curtains, faces watched, and one of them, thick in the gut, gray streaking his beard, stepped into the street with a dog's grin and said, Loretta May, goddamn, thought you burned up with the rest of them. She stopped. Eli did too. The man took a step closer. Didn't think you'd grow up so mean. You come to beg or bend. Eli felt Loretta's grip tighten around his hand. No, she said, and then she let go. The man's face shifted when her hand came free. Not fear, just the animal instinct of something sensing wrong. Loretta didn't reach for the pistol, not yet. She just looked at him like he was less than a thing, something scraped from under a nail. I came to finish something, she said. The man, Eli guessed this was Boyd, eldest of the McKinnons, laughed with a crack in it. You always had fire, little May, but that was a long time ago. Thought we broke it out of you. She stepped forward one pace. Her shadow stretched across the dirt between them like a drawn wire. Call your brothers. Boyd looked to Eli for the first time, eyes squinting. And who's this? Husband, you bring in witnesses to the grave. Eli said nothing. He kept his hand resting easy near his hip, body still, but his blood had turned. The kind of cold that came before the gun got hot. He watched the street. 3 buildings down, a boy paused mid-step with a sack of nails. A woman behind a lace curtain let it drop, eye wide as a saucer. I ain't callin' nobody, Boyd said, but they'll come when they hear the shot. Loretta nodded once. That'll do. She moved faster than Boyd expected. Not for her gun, but for the knife tucked into her boot. In one step she was close enough to slice, and she went for the belly, low and cruel. He caught her wrist just in time, but not before the blade nicked his side. He roared, shoving her back, hand going for the revolver on his belt. Eli's pistol was already up. One shot cracked the morning. Boyd staggered. The bullet caught him in the thigh, not fatal, but it dropped him to the dirt. "You gonna let her murder us all?" he gasped, pressing a hand to the wound. "No," Eli said, "but I won't stop her either." Loretta stood above Boyd, breathing hard. Her blade was still in hand. The street held its breath. No one moved. No one dared. Then, slow as church bells on a dead wind, the rest of the McKinnons came. First came Caleb, tall as a scarecrow, eyes like wet gravel. Then Vernon and Silas, near twins with fists like bricks and mouths full of chewing tobacco. Last came Amos, youngest, clean-shaven, still too pretty for the rot in his blood. They formed a half-circle, guns drawn, boots spaced wide. Redgate watched from behind doors, behind windows, behind silence. "You're making a mess," Vernon said. "She was always trouble," Caleb added. Loretta pointed her knife at Boyd on the ground. "He's not the first." "And he won't be the last," said Silas. "Unless you turn back and forget." She looked at each of them, her eyes unblinking. "No," she said, "not this time." Amos stepped forward, gun hanging loose in his grip. "You really think that little silver ring on your hand makes you something different?" Loretta raised her chin. "It makes me a woman with a right to draw." "And him," Amos nodded at Eli. Eli didn't answer. He moved his coat back, exposing both pistols now, his and the one Loretta gave him. "She's my wife," he said. "Her enemies are mine." Silas spit into the dust. "You don't even know what this is about." Eli's voice didn't rise. "I don't need to." Caleb leveled his rifle. Then the sound came sharp and metallic. A bell. The church tower struck once. Then again, a door opened at the far end of the street. Sheriff Voss stepped out, his badge dulled by years, his rifle ancient but steady in his hands. Behind him, 4 deputies followed, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Put 'em down," Voss said, voice like gravel rolled in whiskey. "All of you." The McKinnons didn't move. "She attacked first," Boyd gasped from the dirt. "She survived first," Voss answered. "Which is more than any of you deserve." Loretta turned to him, eyes burning. "You were there that night." The sheriff didn't flinch. "I was." "And you did nothing." "I did less than nothing. I went home and told my wife the fire was lightning." Loretta's face didn't change, but something in her shoulders loosened. She looked down at Boyd, then back at the rest. "I'm not gonna beg for justice," she said. "I came for it myself." The wind stirred, lifting dust into the air. Silas raised his gun a fraction more. Loretta moved first. This time it was gunfire, not steel. 2 shots from her revolver, one into Silas's chest, one through Amos's shoulder. They dropped like sacks of wheat. Eli's guns barked next, twin booms that echoed off the storefronts. Vernon took a round to the throat. Caleb fired once, missed, and tried again, only to catch the sheriff's bullet between the eyes. The street emptied of noise. Only Boyd remained, blood pooling beneath him. Loretta stepped over a corpse, lowered herself beside Boyd, and held her knife against his neck. "You killed them slow," she said. "My ma." "My pa." He was crying now, a grown man weeping in the dirt. She cut his cheek, just a line, just enough to mark. "You're going to live with this," she said. "You're going to limp, you're going to piss blood. And every time you look in the mirror, you're going to see the girl you didn't finish." She stood, no one stopped her. They buried the bodies behind the church, 6 feet down, no markers. Sheriff Voss offered no charge, no record. Just a silent nod. By nightfall, Redgate had gone quiet again. Eli and Loretta sat in the wagon, watching the horizon. She didn't speak. Neither did he. She pulled her ring off, studied it, and set it in his palm. "You can leave now," she said. Eli closed his hand around it. "I could," he said, "but I won't." The next morning broke soft and overcast. A veil of low clouds spread across the plains, muting the sun, turning Redgate into a town of pale silence and slow-moving shadows. Loretta stood by the pump outside the church, sleeves rolled, hair damp from the basin she'd emptied over her head. Her eyes were fixed on the road east. Eli found her like that, arms still, the pump handle untouched beside her. "You waiting on something?" he asked. "Not something," she said. "Someone." Eli squinted toward the horizon. Nothing moved but a crow picking at the remains of a dead mule across the field. "Wasn't 5 McKinnons," she added. "I counted 5. 5 brothers, yes, but there was a 6th man, hired hand, never knew his name. Always stayed behind the others, real quiet, wore gloves even in the heat." Eli rubbed his jaw. "And you think he's coming back?" "I think he never left." They stayed in Redgate for 3 more days. Sheriff Voss didn't ask them to go. Maybe he figured the place owed her more than silence. Loretta walked the perimeter of town each morning, past the burned livery, through the overgrown lot behind the smithy, down to the dry wash where old wagon wheels rotted in mud. She watched everything, marked doors that opened too fast, eyes that didn't meet hers. Eli drank coffee black and bitter in the saloon, listening. No one mentioned the dead. No one asked questions. Grief in Redgate was a private, twitching thing. Folks glanced at him like he might not stay a man much longer. And maybe he wouldn't. He didn't feel married. He didn't feel free. He felt tied. On the 4th morning, the mule was gone, and the crow's wings were clipped clean off, left in an X beside the church steps. That's when Loretta stopped sleeping. They moved into the empty grain depot, one of the buildings the McKinnons had owned. She said it was fitting. The windows were cracked and the floor creaked like an old ship, but there was a cot and enough space to hide weapons beneath the grain sacks. Eli laid the revolvers out one night, cleaned them with cloth soaked in kerosene. The smell filled the room. Loretta watched from the shadows, legs curled beneath her, back against the wall. She hadn't eaten all day. "You ever afraid?" he asked. She didn't answer at first, just ran a thumb along her knee. "I used to dream about him," she said. "The 6th man, he never spoke. Just stood there, always behind a door. When I woke up, I'd still smell smoke." Eli glanced at her. "We could leave. No one's chasing us yet." She shook her head. "That'd be the same as hiding. I did that once already." A noise came then, metal against wood. They were both standing before the echo finished. Eli slipped to the window, saw nothing. Loretta pressed herself flat against the doorframe, breathing shallow. Her knife glinted in one hand. No voices followed. Then a whistle, high and slow, from the alley behind the depot. Eli moved first. He stepped out back, gun raised. The alley was empty but for a line of wet footprints, bare, wide, like they belonged to someone dragging weight behind them. He followed them as far as the pump, then they vanished in the dirt. When he turned, the glove was nailed to the depot's back door. Leather, cracked, blood dark at the fingertips. One nail through the center, clean as a crucifix. He took it down without a word, brought it inside, and set it on the table. Loretta stared at it for a long time. "That's his," she said. "How can you be sure?" "I remember the seams. He pick his teeth with a matchstick and never talk, but I remember the gloves." Eli lit a lantern. Flame flickered on the walls, casting them long and warped. The glove looked worse in the light, almost alive, as if it had been worn just that morning. "You think he's still in town?" "No," she said. "I think he's in the grain tower." Eli frowned. "Nobody been up there in years." She met his gaze. Exactly. By dawn, they climbed it. The ladder groaned under their weight. Eli went first, gun drawn. Loretta followed with her knife and a bundle of iron nails wrapped in burlap. The top of the tower was half collapsed, open to the sky, and smelled like mold and ash. They found the nest in the far corner. Blankets torn into strips, rat bones, a single boot, a pile of matchsticks arranged in a spiral. And beneath it all, burned into the wood with something sharp, a child's drawing, a stick figure with flames for hair and a smaller one holding a knife. Loretta stared at it until her hands shook. "He watched me," she whispered. Eli checked the rest of the tower. No man, no sound but wind through the grain slats. When they descended, the town looked smaller than before, quieter, like it had taken something in and wouldn't give it back. That night, the fire started. Not theirs, someone else lit it. The depot's wall went up in seconds, oil-soaked boards, flames running high. Eli grabbed what he could. Loretta was already outside, face streaked with ash, eyes glassy. They didn't speak. They ran. The church bell rang once, then again. No one came to help. They made it to the blacksmith's ruins, hid in the crawlspace beneath what remained of the forge. Smoke curled above them. The town stayed silent. Then a voice, low, calm. "You took my employers," it said. "You burned my name." Loretta's breath hitched. She gripped her knife so hard her knuckles split. "I didn't burn it," she whispered. "You left it in their blood." The voice didn't answer, just walked on. Footsteps fading into dust. Eli waited 5 full minutes before crawling out. No one there, just ash drifting through the moonlight like feathers. Loretta followed, slower. She held the glove now, clenched in her hand, and her voice was shaking for the first time. "He knows I'm not done." Eli looked at her. "Then neither are we." They didn't sleep again after that, not properly, not like people who believed morning would bring peace. Loretta moved through Redgate like a ghost with purpose, marking every building with her eyes, tracing escape routes and choke points. She borrowed hammer and nails from the church cellar, patched the broken fencing around the schoolhouse not to mend it, but to learn how long a man would have to climb to scale it. Every act was a calculation. Every motion held its own kind of prophecy. Eli watched her, sometimes helped. More often, he kept lookout from the grain road where the brush grew tall and the air smelled of rust and worms. He shaved with rainwater and flint. His hands were calloused like a man who'd long since forgotten comfort. She never asked if he regretted it, marrying her, staying behind. She didn't have to. If he had, he'd be gone. The glove was nailed above the forge ruins now, high where birds could see it. Loretta left it there like a banner, and no one dared pull it down. The voice didn't come again for days, but the signs did. A dead goat appeared outside the school, slit clean at the neck and drained. No blood trail, just the animal placed deliberate, hooves tucked under like it was still alive. Then the preacher vanished. No break-in, no struggle, just gone. Cot still warm, Bible closed, the leather cover singed at the corner. Sheriff Voss came to them on the 6th day. "You two stirred up a vulture," he said. Eli nodded. "Not stirred, dug up." The sheriff spat into the dust. "Folks are getting nervous." "You stay here, you better finish this." "We didn't start it," Loretta said. Voss stared at her. "No, but you brought it back." He left them with 2 bullets wrapped in cloth. Both etched with a V, the last rounds he'd ever fire, he said. Better they go to someone still willing to bleed. That night, Loretta finally told Eli the rest. They sat under the ruined bell tower, where the church had once cast light across graves. Wind moved like breath through the ribs of the land. "It was him that tied my pa," she said. "Not the brothers, I saw it through the cracks in the barn wall. He took his time, didn't look angry, just methodical, like he'd done it before. He carried a sack of nails and a bottle of vinegar. Said it helped them scream longer." Eli's gut turned. He didn't speak, just watched her speak it like she was scraping it from her bones. I've seen him in dreams, but he doesn't age. He looks the same, gloves, hat low. Sometimes I wonder if he's real or just the shape of what broke me. Eli reached across and set his hand on her shoulder. He's real, he said, and that was when the last matchstick spiral appeared, outside the boarding house this time. Arranged on the porch in the shape of a handprint, only this one had 6 fingers. Loretta crushed it beneath her boot. I know what he's waiting for, she said. He wants to take me last. That night she wrote a letter. 3 pages folded into the lining of her dress. She didn't say what was in it, but she handed Eli a tin of gun oil and told him where to bury her if she didn't return. He didn't argue. He just memorized her face like a man preparing for grief. Then at dawn she stood in the street, alone, not dressed for war, no coat, no rifle, just her father's old hat, her boots, and a single revolver tucked behind her back. Her braid hung long, a rope of defiance down her spine. She waited. The town didn't move. The birds stopped singing. Then the wind changed. Eli saw it from the smithy, the figure stepping from the tree line beyond the east road. Tall, slender. Wearing a long duster the color of soot. Gloves, hat low. His boots made no sound as he walked. He carried no weapon, no bag, just a piece of rope in one hand, coiled loose like a snake. Loretta didn't blink. The figure stopped 10 feet from her, raised his hand, 6 fingers. She didn't flinch. You remember me? She asked. The man didn't answer. He reached up and slowly pulled off the glove. His skin was burned, mangled, the fingers blackened like charred wood, each nail sharpened to a point. On his wrist was a brand, M, the McKinnon cattle mark, scarred over but deep. You helped them, she said, but you weren't one of them. You were the root they grew from. Still no words, he moved toward her. Eli stepped from the alley. Don't, he said. The man paused, turned. His face was wrong, not young, not old, just void, lips pale, eyes dry as bone. A face you forgot the moment you turned away. Eli raised the gun. She's not dying today. Loretta stepped forward, too. Neither are you. The man moved, fast, a blur of coat and gloved fingers. Eli fired twice, missed once. The second hit the coat, spun the man, but didn't drop him. Loretta went low, knife out, slicing for the leg. She made contact, felt tendons snap. The man went down, but not hard. He rolled, lashed out, caught her arm with his nails. Pain exploded. Eli tackled him. They wrestled in the dust, blood smearing the dirt, teeth bared. The man didn't scream, didn't groan, just moved like death with muscle. Eli got one arm pinned. Loretta straddled the man's chest, knife at his throat. She looked him in the eyes. Tell me your name. He didn't speak. She stabbed, once, twice. The third time she left the blade buried in his throat. The man went still, dust settled. Somewhere behind them a door creaked open. Redgate began to breathe again. Eli staggered back, chest heaving. Loretta knelt, hands slick with blood, not shaking, not anymore. She looked at Eli. It's done, she said. He helped her to her feet. The wound on her arm ran deep. He tore cloth from his shirt and wrapped it tight. They didn't bury the body. They burned it, on the same pyre where the depot had stood. Sheriff Voss lit the flame without a word, and the glove, she kept it. The body burned through the night, flames reaching into the black like a warning to anything else hiding in the dark. The smoke curled slow and bitter over Redgate, and the town didn't speak of it, didn't dare. No eulogy, no grave. Just ash scattered by wind and memory. Loretta stood alone as it turned to cinders, the glove tucked into the pocket of her coat, blood stiff in the seams of her sleeve. Eli stayed nearby but didn't touch her. There are silences that belong to the dead and some that belong to the ones who killed them. By dawn, the only sign left was a black circle in the dirt and a shadow that would not lift from the ground. They left Redgate 2 days later. No goodbyes, no trail of dust behind them, Just wagon wheels crunching over dry grass and the mule grunting under its own stubborn rhythm. Loretta rode beside Eli, hand wrapped, jaw tight, eyes watching the horizon not with dread but with resolve. She'd shed no tears, not when they buried her past, not when they burned the one who tried to carry it forward. But the night before they left, Eli had woken to find her sitting beneath the church's bell, that same knife turning slowly in her hands, the tip working a groove into the floorboards. She wasn't whispering, wasn't praying, just moving steel through wood. When he stepped forward, she looked up and said, "I thought it would feel lighter." He'd crouched beside her, reached for her hand, and let the silence speak for him. Now, days from Redgate, they passed a dead hawk lying face down in the sand, flies clustered at its eyes. Loretta stared at it as they rolled by. "We were both orphans, you and me," she said. "But I was made, and you were born." Eli didn't answer right away, just adjusted the reins and looked at the sky, where clouds hung low, thick with the weight of late summer. "You know where we're headed?" he asked. She nodded. "North. There's mining work in the mountains, and no one knows me there." "They'll know something," he said. "You carry it like a brand." She looked at him. "So do you." They made camp that night near a dry creek bed. No fire. Just blankets on hard ground, the mule tethered nearby, chewing bark off a dead tree. Loretta stared up at the stars like they owed her an explanation. Her left arm ached from the healing wound. She traced the scar with her thumb. "When I first saw you," she said, "I didn't think you'd follow me." Eli stretched out beside her, arms crossed behind his head. "Didn't know I would." "And now." He turned to her, face lit by starlight. "Now I follow because I don't know how to walk anywhere else." She nodded once, slow, like that answer filled a space no words had touched before. "I'm still your wife," she said. "You are. But I don't want a ring." Eli sat up, pulled the tin from his coat pocket. Inside was the ring she'd left him back in Redgate, the one he'd never thrown away. He held it out. She didn't take it. Instead, she reached into her own coat, pulled out the glove. Not to return it, not to destroy it. She held it up between them. "This is what I wear now, to remember, not to haunt me, but to name what I've done." Eli nodded. She buried the glove that night, not with ceremony, just a deep hole in the dry bed wrapped in canvas, stone placed on top. A grave no one would mark. When the sun rose, they moved on. Across rivers that stank of sulfur, through towns where no one asked questions, over hills where thunder rolled and vultures wheeled above. They didn't rush, didn't drift either. They walked a steady pace, like people who knew the world would never love them but had decided to live in it anyway. And in time, Loretta smiled again, not often, not brightly. But sometimes, when Eli handed her a slice of hard biscuit, or when the wind came down from the north and carried pine on it instead of sand, she'd let it rise. That ghost of something lost. Not innocence, not peace, but agency. In a mining town called Cutter's Spine, she took a job patching coats for the men too poor to buy new ones. Eli hauled freight and broke stallions for a stable run by an old woman who once shot a deputy in the foot for touching her apron. They didn't call themselves husband and wife, didn't have to. The town knew by how they stood near one another, how they looked first for the other when danger passed by, how neither ever sat with their back to the door. On the anniversary of the fire, Loretta took the knife from its hiding place and threw it into the river that cut through Cutter's spine. She didn't say a word, and when Eli joined her, standing at her side, she whispered, "He never gave me his name." "You gave him one instead," Eli said. She nodded. "Yes." And she never spoke of the glove again. But every time thunder rolled far off, and every time the wind moved through tall grass like someone breathing down her neck, she turned her head and made sure it was gone. Still watching, still ready, but not running anymore. They weren't free, but they were no longer hunted. And for people like them, that was the best kind of ending.